And welcome back to the Hot Lap. Like, subscribe and notify, do all that. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much. But we are looking at our Friday practice session. We're looking at practice 1, where the two Ferraris were fastest, basically 25 and 24 laps for Leclerc and Sainz respectively, but 1 and 2, less than a tenth apart. I mean, Sainz has really upped his game, hasn't he? Is this going to remain for the rest of the weekend? Will this be a weekend like Monza? And I don't think I didn't really expect the Ferraris to be this good. However, reports are coming that these new flexi wing rules are helping Ferrari more than the others. Now, Red Bull are third and Max Verstappen just over 1 1/4 tenths off, with fourth Lando Norris, fifth Lewis Hamilton, and all the top 5 within 2 tenths of each other. And we've got 3.5 tenths back pretty much is George Russell, Sergio Perez in 6th and 7th. 8th was Fernando Alonso. 9th was Yuki Tsunoda, nearly 7 tenths off. 10th, Esteban Ocon, 0.716 off. Lance Stroll in 11th. He was a good half a second, a bit more than that off his teammate. Pierre Gasly in the Alpine in 12th. Alex Albon in 13th in the Williams Mercedes 1.3 seconds off. Bottas in the Alfa Romeo in 14th, the top Alfa Romeo there. 15th for Kevin Magnussen in the Haas Ferrari, 1.5 seconds off. Also 1.5 seconds off was Liam Lawson. Yes, the super sub, so to speak. But he was a good second, nearly a second. 8, 9 tenths off Yuki Tsunoda. Zhou is 18th, and he has renewed, a bit more on that story in a bit, but he's renewed with Alfa Romeo. That's something we forgot to talk about yesterday. Oscar Piastri in the McLaren 9th, and Logan Sargent, that doesn't have an S at the end of his name, Sargent, last in the Williams, yes, 2.5 seconds off, and he was over a second, 1.1 seconds slower than his teammate. I mean, free practice 1, it was early in the evening, let's say. It was still light. Is it really representative? I guess not that much, but it was, it was the team's first chance at this new track layout, which looks to be 10 seconds faster. But interestingly, the more significant time of, I think, 2 o'clock our time, but in the evening here, which is going to be representative of that race, was practice 2, where once again it's Carlos Sainz and Leclerc. Carlos Sainz is a smidge faster than Leclerc. Third this time was George Russell, less than 2.5 tenths off the pace. And then in fourth, Fernando Alonso, about just over 3.5 tenths. And just under the half a second mark was fifth for Lewis Hamilton. A couple of tenths off George there, but Lewis Hamilton fifth, the top 5 within half a second. Yep, I know what you're saying. No Red Bull. Where are the Red Bulls? Well, we'll continue because they're not 6. 6 goes to just under 6 tenths off. I was going to say Lando Norris. I nearly said Fernando Alonso again, but no, it was Lando Norris in that McLaren Mercedes, and quite a few significant updates in that McLaren as well. 7th, interestingly, just under 7 tenths off was Sergio Perez, and 8th was Max Verstappen, just over 7 tenths off. Nearly 9 tenths off, we have Kevin Magnussen in the Haas Ferrari. 10th, Valtteri Bottas, just under the second mark. Top 10 within a second, all doing between 27 and 23 laps for the top 10. Nico Hulkenberg in the Haas Ferrari, just over the second mark off. 12th, Liam Lawson bettering not yesterday, but bettering the earlier practice, and he is just 1.1 seconds off, with Esteban Ocon 1.2 seconds off, along with Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin, about 1.2 seconds off. He was, though, once again, he's 8 tenths off Fernando Alonso. Oscar Piastri, strangely, 1.3 seconds off. He did 23 laps, compared to Lando Norris. I mean, is this the weekend now where Lando Norris once again asserts his dominance like he did at the beginning of the year? I think, I'm not saying he needs to, but, and questions weren't really being asked of Lando Norris, but people were talking, how good is this Piastri guy in his rookie season? And this is probably going to be, one of the big tests of the year, as it's one of the more challenging tracks despite, I think, the new track layout. I think people are still thinking it's going to be challenging. So after Piastri, we've got Yuki Tsunoda, 1.3 tenths off. Zhou just under the 1.5 seconds off in 17th. Pierre Gasly in 18th, 1.7 seconds off. Then you've got the two Williams. Logan Sargent this time faster than Alex Albon. That's probably, though, because he completed 28 laps and poor Albon only completed 5. I mean, Logan Sargent's 2.2 seconds off and Alex Albon just under the 3.5 second mark in terms of being off. What do the practice times mean? Well, Ferrari are looking really strong. Mercedes not looking too bad. Aston Martin looking okay, especially in the race pace. Aston Martin fared quite good, as did, I think, Mercedes. And Lando Norris not looking too bad in that McLaren. But what's up with Oscar Piastri? But the big question mark, I hear you say, is what is happening? What is going on with the Red Bull team? Both of them about 7 tenths off. Is this... I'd need to double check, but this has to be one of the worst practice of the year, Friday practice days of the year for the Red Bull team. They weren't too happy with the balance. But, and here we go, this is what's interesting. This is on planetf1.com by Jamie Woodhouse. Red Bull have been accused of playing games after that Singapore Grand Prix practice. Yes, Red Bull looked at all sorts. They looked out of sorts, let's say, for the Singapore Grand Prix. But one of the Sky hosts of the weekend, Danica Patrick, is not really reading too much into it. Now, while we know Ferrari scored a 1-2 in that opening session, Max Verstappen was not really too far behind, just about a tenth. But FP2, the second practice session, which we've just looked at, was far more alarming for Red Bull, as the Ferrari claimed another 1-2, and Verstappen and Perez were 7 tenths off. And Perez claiming over the team radio that he feared crashing in every braking zone due to the instability in the rear end of the RB19. But Danica Patrick having none of it, just playing games. Now, while only the brave would count Red Bull out come qualifying, the deficit to Ferrari is, I think concerning. As I said, probably one of the worst practice sessions they've had on the Fridays. Patrick, though, does not believe we should read too deeply into their struggles. She said, "I'm not always buying every time that a team has a bad day or even a session," the former IndyCar and NASCAR racer told Sky, because sometimes it's just all of a sudden turns the other direction. Now, there's probably games being played and then sometimes you just miss it. So yeah, really not counting them out. But they did come in saying it would probably be a little more of a struggle. So that's so far been true. But as we know, it's only Friday. And how many times have we seen a team struggle on the Friday to go gangbusters on the Saturday and then completely gangbusters on the Sunday? But as we know, FP2, the top 7 were for Ferrari, Mercedes, Aston Martin, and then you had Red Bull and McLaren, and Sainz P1. I mean, he is not looking too bad at all. Now, and former Aston Martin strategist Bernie Collins also on that Sky F1 team. She believes the Marina Bay Street, a venue which, as we know, demands great driver confidence, will continue to create a mixed up top 10. But here's the interesting thing. Even though Danica Patrick thinks they're playing games, Max Verstappen admits Red Bull pace way worse than expected, and Ferrari has surprised everyone. This is on Sky F1. Sky Sports. Now, Red Bull have come into the Singapore Grand Prix. As we know, they've been unbeaten with quali tomorrow, and it's saying that Red Bull could face their biggest challenge yet to their unprecedented, unbeaten sequence of F1 race wins at the Singapore Grand Prix. And as we know, Verstappen and Sergio Perez unusually finished outside that top 6, struggling to get the RB19 to their liking on what is, and as we know, a twisty circuit where braking stability is important. I'd imagine overall stability is quite important. Now, Verstappen said after finishing 8th fastest, just struggling a lot with the balance of the car. He said, "We tried quite a lot of things in FP2. Some worked, some didn't. Never really got the car together. So quite a few things to figure out tonight, basically." Now, Verstappen is on a record, as we know, of 10 consecutive victories. Could he make it 11? And as he's fast closing on that title. But he said, "I will try, of course, to improve it. It's quite a big gap. Ferrari is very fast. I think we're just way worse than we expected." And while Red Bull certainly have not always finished Friday at the top of the timesheet this year, few are likely to believe they will not come back in the mix for pole position when qualifying begins. Stay tuned on Saturday, I guess. So, Also, we mentioned the DRS zone, and there potentially being a fourth zone, but some of the teams went against it. Well, Hamilton, this is from racefans.net by Keith Collins and Claire Cottingham. Hamilton has criticised Formula One teams who did not support the addition of that extra DRS zone. The layout, as we know, has changed, and Hamilton has praised the alteration to the track and the fresh surface which has been laid in places. And Hamilton said the changes to the track have been great. I think they have really opened up the circuit to be even greater than it was before. And he went on to say that the change they've done with the surface, the new tarmac that they've put down, has made it so much more enjoyable to drive. However, Hamilton Hamilton and the other drivers, apologies, said an extra DRS zone should have been added into the new straight, which we talked about, so you don't really go underneath that part of Singapore anymore. He said, I don't think at the moment there'll be more overtaking. Maybe there'll be slightly better overtaking into 7 just because the track is better through that first couple of corners. But I think we need DRS in that new last section. The FIA, though, chose not to add a fourth DRS zone at this point on the circuit after canvassing the view of teams. All the drivers, we all requested it from the FIA, said Hamilton. The FIA asked all the teams, and there's a couple of teams that turned it down. So in the drivers' briefing, we'll try to bring it up, but the teams should be for more racing, not against it. It's interesting to have a few teams that are against it, but we'll discuss and try. Now, Perez said yesterday at the GPDA was pushing for that extra DRS zone because we feel like it can be approved for overtaking. However, Ocon believes the FIA was reluctant to add a zone and would include the flat-out left-hand kink at turn 15. He said the FIA is concerned about safety in that little left-hand kink, I think. Yes, there is a slight turn, I reckon personally, and the other drivers too, that it's not going to be an issue. It's interesting because, yes, you do have that kink. However, one argument could be made, despite the DRS flap, there's still quite a lot of downforce because of the twisty nature of the track you have here, would potentially protect that, I guess. But there we go. But in other news, again on planetf1.com, Jamie Woodhouse has, hopefully we get a final end to this Helmut Marko South American saga. Yes, Helmut Marko punished, but he's received a punishment by the FIA. So the FIA has issued a written warning to Red Bull advisor Helmut Marko following his controversial comments regarding Sergio Perez. As we know, he made headlines for all the wrong reasons going into the Singapore Grand Prix. Red Bull Christian Horner confirmed that Formula One and the FIA had been in touch about Marko's comments, for which he publicly apologised, and the FIA have taken action. In a statement, the governing body wrote, "We can confirm that Helmut Marko has received a written warning and been reminded of his responsibilities as a public figure in motorsport in line with the FIA's code of ethics." Mercedes racer Verstappen's former title Lewis, as we know, has been highly critical, but he's also stated he's not surprised by Marko's comments. Interestingly, Red Bull, Horner was asked why a statement wasn't put out or would have put out quicker or something by Red Bull, and he said he's not actually. Horner stated that Marko is not actually employed directly by Red Bull Racing. I don't know. I mean, I don't really get why they didn't really act on it a lot quicker than they should have done. It should have almost been immediately, shouldn't it? But these things happen. As I said yesterday and the day before, people make mistakes. And talking of mistake, is Massa making a mistake with the 2008 court case to get that title back? Because they've got an interesting story on motorsport.com by Jonathan Noble. He says basically the Massa F1 case could set a precedent amid Abu Dhabi 2021 questions. He said Mercedes is watching developments in Felipe Massa's action over that 2008 Formula One championship with interest amid hints it could trigger a review of that 2021 Abu Dhabi outcome. And as we know, Massa began a legal process for that 2008 title. We've been speaking about it time and time again. And they've basically said that we want everything that happened in 2008, 2009 to come to light. And Massa's action, though, in trying to pursue a legal challenge over a lost championship has promoted some discussion about whether or not a successful outcome for him could open that door for other controversial decisions to be contested. And the most obvious, as we know, is going to be that recent 2021 championship, which swung in a controversial final round at Abu Dhabi after the FIA's handling of a late safety car restart opened that door for Max Verstappen to snatch that race on the final lap, which probably shouldn't happen when you looked at the rules. So speaking at the Singapore Grand Prix, Mercedes boss Toto Wolff said Mercedes were keeping a watching brief over the developments in the Massa case because there may be scope for legal precedent to be set. He said, well, interesting to follow, said Wolff when asked by motorsport.com. He said, it's clearly not something that anybody saw coming. The rules are pretty clear in Formula One. It's a civil case behind it. It would certainly set a precedent. Whatever it is, we're looking from the sidelines with curiosity. I don't think Mercedes would probably do anything. I mean, most people, including myself, do not believe that Felipe Massa is going to get that 2008 championship. Maybe, at most, some kind of payout. But I don't think he'll be etched into the history as the 2008 world champion. And won it in a court case over a decade and a half later. Yeah. But it is a really interesting story, isn't it? And we will be following it here on the Hot Lap. Last bit of news, though, something that we forgot, so I've got to apologise to Alfa Romeo and Zhou himself. He signs a new deal at Alfa Romeo to extend his stay into next year. As we know, China's first full-time F1 driver, Zhou, has signed a new deal to extend his stay at Alfa Romeo alongside Valtteri Bottas. One thing which is going to be lovely is we got China back next year, so he's going to be racing in front of his home fans, which is nice. And Zhou made his debut last year with the Sauber-run Swiss team in 2022, scoring a point at Bahrain. And the team said that his maturity and methodical approach in his second year had won him even more supporters in the team, and a new deal was a natural conclusion as he aims for further improvement. So, congratulations to Zhou. Well done. This has been the Hot Lap. Tomorrow is going to be qualifying. We'll have our qualifying report. Stay tuned, and thank you very much for listening.